Hello, everyone. It's me again, coming to you live and unscripted as I almost always do. And this is take two. If you're watching my last live, which was, I don't know, half an hour, 45 minutes ago, it ended, maybe an hour. It's over an hour ago. I got an important phone call. Nothing bad, good news. But it interrupted, it truncated my video, and I wanted to end with something. There's something I want to put out there, and it's not something I've heard from anywhere else, but I think if you pay attention to what I'm predicting, I think you will see the logic in it. And I have a bias. I have my point of view. And as stated in that last video, while I don't consider myself a member of the MAGA camp, having something of a MAGA hat notwithstanding, I'm not a big fan of the cult of personality that seems to surround this whole MAGA camp. Randy Kinder's here. Now, I made a prediction in the subject line, and I am predicting that Kamala Harris, or Kamala, I think it's Kamala Harris, that she will be the 47th president of the United States. Randy Kinder is saying, no, it's not a cult. Okay. And that's fair enough. I don't think that everyone who supports Trump is a member of this cult, but I do think there are those who do. I know individuals like this who think that Trump is appointed by God on high, that he has God's seal on him, and his miraculous survival of that assassination attempt on July 13th is seen as proof of this lends justification to this belief that Trump is anointed by God. I do not go that far, but there are some individuals who do. And those are the ones I would say who are cult-like followers, who believe Trump can basically walk on water. And but I think that Kamala Harris is going to be the 47th president of the U.S. And I explained it at the end of that video before I got cut off by a phone call. But here's the way I see it playing out. Joe Biden finally gave his announcement. He did a State of the Nation address earlier this evening in prime time from the White House, sitting at the desk in the Oval Office, telling the American people why he was resigning, or not resigning, but rather why he was not going to be seeking re-election in November. And thanks to, the name now escapes me, my friend from Texas, Hank Holliday, that's it, November 5th. He will not be seeking re-election on November 5th, and that he's placed his endorsement. He's giving, he's pumping up Kamala Harris, as he's endorsed her to be the standard bearer for the Democratic Party, and how important this election is, the most important election in history, how democracy itself is on the line, blah, 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 hyperbole on steroids. And I know he didn't write the speech, he was just reading it. And then at one point, I think he said cherry instead of cherish, our cherry nation, or something like that. Later, he got it right and said cherished. I've got Candy here, so I'm going to give her a treat. There you go. Well, what I see happening between now and when I think it will happen, I think Joe Biden will end up leaving the presidency in one way or another, sometime probably in October, maybe 2-3 weeks before November 5th. And I think the time component is important. I don't think Joe Biden wants to resign the presidency now, because if he did it now, then Kamala Harris, as the vice president, would take the oath of office. They might even have a public ceremony out on, the steps of the Capitol. I guess that's where they do it. That beautiful backdrop of the mall. And this would be the first time in history that the United States has a president who's a woman, and a woman of color, color on top of that. Randy Kinder going full conspiracy theory, saying Biden is dead. I've heard that one. Everyone's talking about Weekend at Biden's, like the old Weekend at Bernie's movie. If you've never seen it, it's two guys who have to make their boss appear to be alive so that they won't be killed. So they prop him up and everything. I'm not going to go that far. But what I see happening is this. Late October, Kamala Harris resign, or rather, Joe Biden, by hook or by crook, in some fashion, leaves the presidency. I'll leave it open. There are various ways that one could leave the presidency. One would involve, when Lyndon Johnson became president. He became president because John F. Kennedy was killed. I don't think that, I'm not going to throw that completely out the window. I think it's possible. I genuinely think they're going to move heaven and earth to keep Trump out of the White House. They're going to move heaven and earth. The only thing is, you have to maintain the illusion that it's the will of the people. There has to be this view, this accepted narrative. In 2020, in that election, most Americans, I would argue, were willing to accept the fact that Biden won the election. There are many people, myself included, who have serious doubts about that. You had a state like Michigan where Trump's leading by 300,000 votes. I forget how many exactly, but it was Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, these key so-called battleground states. And Trump was winning in all of them. And then the mail-in ballots all came in while everyone was sleeping. And then all these key battleground states flipped, and they went from being Trump to being Biden. They had softened the ground by saying, well, most of the mail-in ballots are going to be for Biden, because Democrats are more afraid of COVID than Republicans. Republicans are more prone to vote in person than Democrats. Democrats are going to mail in their ballots. I have my doubts, and I also have trouble believing that in the midst of a supposed pandemic, that voter turnout would be higher than at pretty much any time in recent American history. I think you had to go back all the way to Kennedy Nixon in 1960 for a higher percentage turnout of the electorate. And that Biden inspired people to come out and vote and to mail in ballots. It didn't pass the smell test for me. No one can prove that it was fraudulent. There's no evidence. There's no concrete smoking gun evidence showing that it was rigged. But absence of evidence doesn't necessarily mean absence of evidence. Just because the evidence, you haven't found it, doesn't mean it's not there. It just means maybe you're not looking hard enough. But 2024, this coming up election, Kamala Harris, if she takes the oath of office, let's say mid to late October, she gets publicity on steroids. She gets to take the oath of office. She gets to become the first woman president in the history, nearly 250-year history of the United States of America. First woman of color. She ticks off 2 boxes, and you can just imagine the coverage that would ensue. And I can imagine the push polling going on, where pollsters phone or conduct a poll with Americans saying, Is it positive that America has joined the ranks of countries like Pakistan and the United Kingdom and countless in India and nations that have been led by a woman? Is this a good thing for America? You know, and then publishing the results, nearly 70% of Americans are, view Kamala Harris's ascension to the presidency as a positive step and and it would just be wall to wall. And then if the election is very shortly thereafter, just a week, 2, 3 weeks after, it gives Donald Trump and the Republicans very little time, and it would create this impression of a wave. And then when the results come in, and if Kamala is presented as the winner of the election, it seems plausible, it seems reasonable, it seems legitimate. And so this, will of the people must be respected. This, we're talking, when we talk about the presidency of the United States of America, we're talking about the most powerful elected position in the entire Western world. There are literally trillions of dollars at stake. And when Donald Trump, one of the first things Donald Trump did when he came into office was he killed the Trans-Pacific trade deal. One of the greatest things I view of his presidency, because what free trade sounds great, but ultimately what it results in is a race to the bottom. And it's why when it started as the U.S.-Canadian free trade agreement, then it was expanded to include Mexico, so-called NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement. And what did Americans see? They saw their manufacturing base transited down to Mexico, where people work for $2 an hour and no bathroom breaks. And is that what you want to compete with? And now when you expand that even further into the Pacific Rim with this Trans-Pacific trade deal, and you have countries like Malaysia and Taiwan and China especially, and how are American workers who have Americans have a high standard of living and they want to protect it. And so Donald Trump canceled that trade deal. And that was good for American workers. Hillary Clinton, who was running against him in 2016, she called that trade deal the gold standard. And Hillary Clinton was totally in the back pocket of big money corporate and banking interests. And that was an amazing policy decision of his. There is so much money at stake. They do not, I am convinced, the powers that be, the WEF types, they are hell-bent to keep Trump out of the White House, but they have to do it in such a way that that American voters will believe that the will of the people was respected. So they have to create this alternate reality, a digital reality where, well, I guess I voted Trump, but I guess I was in the minority. I guess most people voted for Kamala. I don't know why, but look online, look at Twitter. Everyone's saying she's the greatest thing. I guess that's what it is. And they have to create this. I'm going full conspiracy theory here, but that's the challenge that Trump is facing, that the MAGA crowd is facing, is that I think my opinion cannot be proven. I cannot substantiate it. I don't have a smoking gun, but I do think the 2020 election was stolen. I do not think Joe Biden garnered more votes than any president in U.S. history. No, I don't believe that happened. I don't believe sleepy, creepy Joe Biden which seems a little mean. I mean, he's old. They wouldn't even, when they found classified documents, they said, well, yeah, it's a crime and everything, but he's old and everything, and we're not going to prosecute this old doddering man. You know, he's something of a sympathetic figure now. And I get that. I mean, you watch him after the debate and he can't even walk down the stairs. You know, and we've all seen that. Most of us have been around elderly people. And my grandfather was like that. He was unsure of his footing. You know, whatever. You know, it happens as we age. Not all the time. Some people are very robust. Some people are out golfing when they're 80, 90, 100. You know, others decline. And Biden is one who is declined significantly. Randy Kinder's opinions notwithstanding, Randy seems to think that Biden, that's a body double or something. Well, if they're going to put a body double up for him, I think they want someone who would show some progression upwards and be a little more, have a little more mental acuity and a little more physical, wouldn't appear so frail, unable to walk up a flight of stairs without falling down, unable to walk across a podium without doing a face plant on it and having to be helped up by the Marine color guard or whoever it was. There's that new ad put out by the Trump campaign saying Kamala was in on it. And in watching that, when you see the title, it's somewhat clickbaity. You know, Kamala was in on it after what just happened July 13th. And a lot of speculation out there, not just by me. And this, to me, is not, you know, it's well within the realm. Yes, I am back on holiday. I got a call from a family member that was a shot in the arm. Something made me feel good. And anyway, someone, well, I won't go into it, but we did talk about politics. And they do watch this channel on occasion, and likes Trump's policies, doesn't like myself. There are aspects of his personality that I do not like. He's braggacious, he's arrogant, he's narcissistic, but at the same time, I have to question to what degree is that the opinion that I'm being programmed to have by the news media. They want me to think of him in negative terms. They never say anything positive about Trump on NBC Nightly News or ABC or CBS or CNN. They'll never say anything positive about Trump. His administration negotiated the Abraham Accords between Israel and neighboring Arab states, and they treated it like it was nothing. Most significant peace deal in the Middle East since the Camp David peace accords under Jimmy Carter, and they treat it like it's nothing. That was nuts. But they couldn't give Trump a win for anything. They couldn't give people any excuse on the nightly news that programs people what to think, what to believe, and how to feel. They couldn't give him any credit for anything. The economy's roaring. Well, you know, the global economy. It's not just America. It's not Trump. It's not Trump. It's because of it's because of the policy by guys like Gavin Newsom and Whitmer in Michigan. They're the reason. You know, they couldn't give Trump any credit for anything. But his public persona is certainly arrogant and braggacious and, you know, narcissistic. That's the way he projects. But it makes sense. In the Shark Tank that politics is, it's either eat or be eaten. And Trump knows how to play the game. Trump, probably better than anyone in this world, knows how that game works. And he knows how to play it. And you give no quarter. Because if you do, the sharks are going to take you down and take you down hard. So you never admit a mistake. You show no humility. You've got to be a lion, a remorseless, rapacious lion. And that otherwise you're going to get eaten alive when you've got the WEF types and the corporate media all they're just sniffing for blood. They want to take him down, and Trump knows how to fight back against that. And you can't be a choir boy in that type of environment. I don't. Can God use evil people? God even used Pharaoh to demonstrate his power and his might and his glory when the Israelites were released from bondage in Egypt. Hank Holliday is asking, why do I think she will win? The reason I think Kamala Harris will win is first, the 47th president of the United States, because Biden, before November 5th, is going to be out of office in some way. He'll either resign or be forced out, or I don't like to even say it, but JFK 1963, something will happen to remove him so that sometime mid-late October, Kamala Harris, a week, two, no more than 3 weeks, that would be my rough guess, 3 weeks at the most, before the election, she gets a photo op on steroids of taking the oath of office, becoming the first woman president of the United States of America, the first female of color to become, 2 boxes ticked off, and the press coverage, huge galas, inauguration balls. They could have it in where they have, I think it's on the steps of the Capitol where they do the inauguration ceremony with the mall backdrop, and get all the progressive woke types from all over the country to fill it and just present this image of Kamala Harris as, the people's choice, so that when the election comes on November 5th and the results come in, that the perception will be, well, the will of the people has to be respected. She won, and you can create a digital illusion. You can swamp Twitter with all kinds of accounts, bots, AI, and just create this digital illusion. You can create a mountain of Facebook accounts and Instagram accounts and TikTok accounts and create this digital illusion that of a reality. If you go onto Twitter, everyone in the world believes that man-made climate change is the most existential threat mankind has ever faced, if you go onto Twitter. But if you walk around and you talk to people, the majority of people recognize that, hey, climate changes. This planet goes through cyclical changes in climate. I mentioned it many times, 950 AD to about 1400, roughly. We went through what is called the medieval warming period. The Vikings settled Greenland because it was a green land. Randy Kinder believes that I need to understand there is good. I think you're meaning to write, Randy, correct me if I'm wrong, that there's good fighting evil right now, that this is a battle in the spiritual realm, perhaps. And I do get that. I do get that. And could God use a broken, fallen person like Donald Trump to manifest his will? God can do whatever God can do anything. So I don't discount that possibility. It's just that Trump, his public persona gets under my skin. But again, I'm somewhat apologetic for it. I defend it somewhat because it's almost required in the political sphere. I'll give you an example of something that happened in Canada. I'm not sure. I know Randy or Hank is American. Randy, you're Canadian, I believe. And I've got now I've got people watching. It's going up 5+ people watching. But for those who maybe don't know Canada that well, or maybe have forgotten, we had a prime minister in this country named Jean Chrétien. He became prime minister roughly around 92, 93, somewhere around there. And he won 3 consecutive majority governments. And during his time as prime minister of Canada, something called ad scam came out, or sometimes it was called the $1 billion boondoggle. And what the Liberal government was doing was they were giving money to ad agencies that were friendly to the Liberal Party for work that they never did. And then these same companies then funneled money back to the Liberal Party in the form of donations. And Chrétien, when he was prime minister, stonewalled it. Just, there's nothing to see here, forget it. No, it's, it's all garbage, and ignore it. And he just pretended like it didn't exist. Then finally, after 3 consecutive majority governments, he was prime minister for in and around 12 years or so. He resigned, and Paul Martin, his finance minister, ascended to the leadership. Paul Martin became the prime minister of Canada. He ran an election shortly thereafter, and he won a minority government. So he was still the prime minister, but in a minority situation, meaning that the Conservatives, the Liberals, the Conservatives, the NDP, and the Bloc Québécois combined, they had more seats than him. And during his time as a minority PM, he created something called the Gomery Inquiry that examined bipartisan, nonpartisan judicial committee that was set up to investigate the ad scam scandal. And for the most part, it was pretty damn open and transparent, and it showed that the government, it gave the Liberal government a black eye, but it was done under Chrétien's watch. And Chrétien would never have had that Gomery inquiry. But Paul Martin, as a minority prime minister, gave in and allowed the inquiry to go on. And he basically put the bullets in the gun that ended up losing him the next election, and Stephen Harper became the prime minister. If you and that's Canada. That's Canadian politics, which is rough and tumble, but nothing compared to American politics. American politics, as soon as one election ends, the campaigning for the next one starts right away. That's what you hear when whoever it is, whether it's Mitt Romney or whether it's, trying to think different elections, or Bob Dole, trying to remember the losers, John Kerry, when they give their concession speech, the candidates stand up and say the fight for the next election begins today. We've got to respect the will of the people, but the fight for the next election begins today. And Randy Kinder's writing that, this battle is worldwide. And we are in a spiritual battle. We are. I talk a lot about faith on this channel. And ultimately, whichever way things go in this world, what people need to realize is that we are not home. That this is a beastly world. Satan is called the prince of this world for a reason. And there's a reason why in Revelation, I think it's chapter 17, 18? I was reading it the other night, where the angels calls to, God's people to come out of Babylon. The hour is now. The hour means this is the time. We are living in this window of time, and we are being called. But that's a call for every age. That is a call for every age, for God's people to powers of this world to get into a relationship with Christ, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the name above every other name. So that's my prediction. I'm going to wrap it up there. And that other video went on 45 or so minutes. This one's about half an hour. If you liked it, please give it a thumb. If you like what I have to say and you think I have something to inject into the public discourse, please subscribe. It helps me build and it helps me get my voice out further. But I do think Americans, especially, but everyone around the world, we're all going to be watching this. And you know, America's in Canada, we say that when the United States sneezes, Canada catches a cold. Who, you know, it's the leader of the free world. And the question is it going to be Trump or is it going to be Kamala Harris? Well, I think buckle up, because I think you're going to see Kamala Harris in the Oval Office, in the White House as the president before we get to the end of October. I think it'll be 2-3 weeks. That would be my guess. 2 to 3 weeks before the election, before November 5th. So mid-October, by whatever means, Joe Biden will vacate and Kamala Harris will be given the oath of office. She'll assume the role of President of the United States. She'll get wall-to-wall positive press conference, create the digital illusion and a media illusion that Kamala is incredibly popular and that everyone's in love with her. And then the vote comes. And, you know, be interesting to see. Trump will gather, he'll get 10, 20,000 out to a rally. I wonder if Kamala Harris can fill a Quiznos. Hank Holiday, there's that Brandon guy who gave the prophecy that eerily accurate about Trump being an attempt on his life with a bullet piercing his ear and falling to the ground. And that's part of his prediction, what Hank Holiday is saying, that this Brandon is predicting that Trump will win, and that after his victory and maybe after his inauguration, which would be in February of 2025, that there would then be an orchestrated economic collapse. I talked about my late great father who worked in the financial industry his entire career. And we lived through the oil embargo, through the energy crisis in the early 70s, and double-digit inflation and a significant recession that happened. And my father expressed the opinion at one time that he was not conspiratorial minded at all, but he said he sometimes wondered if, you know, certain individuals sat around a table somewhere and said, hey, let's take the economy down. The economy's going too good right now. Let's do some things that'll cool things down. People's expectations are getting too high. We need to lower the temperature. Things are getting too hot. And I don't discount that possibility. We all know about the Bilderberger Group. We all know about the World Economic Forum. We all know about the Council of Foreign Relations. Then you can get into groups like Coconut Grove. You can get into Skull and Bones. You can get into Club of Rome. There are countless little groups. I consider them largely Masonic in nature. And that's something I'm going to do a video on shortly. And it's going to be talking about the connections between Masonry and the Latter-day Saint Church. And not just the Latter-day Saint Church, other churches as well, but in particular, the Latter-day Saint Church. So Randy Kinderat wants to know who owns the Bank of Canada. Well, it's not a government-owned institution. It's a private company. I think the Rothschilds are the major shareholders, and probably the Rockefellers too, and some very dubious people who have their levers on, we like to think it says Bank of Canada, but the central banking system is a privately held corporation. That was Ron Paul, who ran for president. I think he tried to run as an independent. I know he tried to run as the Republican candidate, and he got a lot of support, but the media completely shut him down and ignored him. And Ron Paul's, one of his main key planks was to audit the Fed. That's what they call the bank. In Canada, we call it the Bank of Canada. In the US, they call it the Federal Reserve Bank. And Ron Paul, one of his major planks of his platform was to audit the Fed. And what happened when he was doing a campaign rally at a state fair? Press was at the state fair, but they were there to see, I'm trying to remember the names of some of these people who, everyone else who was there, they'd look at them, but they wouldn't even look at Ron Paul. Even when he came in second and third, they wouldn't even mention him. They'd mention guys who came in fifth and sixth. Jon Stewart of The Daily Show, the Daily Show on the Comedy Network. He interviewed Ron Paul a few times and lampooned the manner in which the mainstream media was completely ignoring Ron Paul, because don't audit the Fed. Anyway, God bless. Who owns the press? You're looking at 4 or 5 families who own the world. The Rothschilds, one, Rockefellers. Those are the 2 that immediately spring to my mind. Yeah, and you got to look at who owns the BlackRocks, who owns these major hedge funds. And then you look at groups, and then their tentacles spread into groups like the World Economic Forum, like the Bilderbergers, like the Council on Foreign Relations, like the Club of Rome. And, where does the fresh blood come from? It comes from organizations like Skull and Bones at Yale. And Randy Kinder writes, I think you meant to write God bless, but it looks like you wrote God bless. But anyway, have a great night, and I'll end it. I didn't get to end the last one this way, but I will end it now this way. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. May the Lord grant you peace. Get into the word. I've got a couple ideas for my next videos. One's about Masonry and its connection to various churches, including the LDS Church. And another one is strictly about faith, where I'm going to let go of my reticence to use profanity, because I want to reach out to people who don't know Christ. I want to reach out to non-Christians. I want to reach out to people who profess an atheistic worldview. And I think the way to do that is to loosen my tongue a little bit. Heck, I used to be in the Army. I'm no stranger to F-bombs and everything else. And I actually don't really genuinely have an issue. It's the heart. It's the heart. And words are just letters pushed against each other to make a sound. And I don't think an F-bomb necessarily is profane. It depends on the context. But anyway, that's a thought I'm having about a video I may do in the future. God bless. Sleep well. Thank you, Randy. I will. I have to work tomorrow. We'll talk to you maybe tomorrow, but certainly within the next 3 days. Good night.